would be part of our class this evening. Now, before we get started into the question, let me remind you of what we're doing. On the other classes, we're looking at what we call the Bible Study Challenge. My manna in the mornings and my messages of hope each week, those 5 classes, are really built around the Bible Study Challenge. Now, what is the Bible Study Challenge? The Bible Study Challenge is simply an easy way for us to come to know, understand, and remember God's Word. Now, if you will watch those 5 videos each week, and they'll spend just 5 minutes a day reciting the major keys, come the middle of March. Now, I'll explain why the middle of March here in just a moment. But come the middle of March, you and I are going to know over 500 key events of the Bible. Now, I was saying by the end of February. Actually, now I'm saying the middle of March because we are doing Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in a chronological timeline. I'm taking all 4 gospel writers and kind of mashing them all together and then doing it in a chronological timeline from the birth of Jesus all the way through his resurrection. Now, because of that, that's going to delay the end of our series. So we're looking now at probably about the middle of March to end the series. So please join us for the Bible Study Challenge. I believe you'll really enjoy the Bible Study Challenge. Now, the question for tonight actually ties in to what we're doing with the Bible Study Challenge. You notice I said that we're taking the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we're kind of mashing them together, and we're going to present those 4 books in a chronological time frame. Well, here's the question. Michael, do we know for sure the timeline of the Bible? Which books came first? Well, to answer your question, no. Can I say without any doubt in my heart, can I be 100% sure and I'm completely confident in the timeline that is usually presented with the Bible? No. Because remember, time, in terms of timeline, that's a human invention. God has no beginning. God has no end. To God, there's no such thing as time. It's all just one big existence. He's always been. He had no beginning. God will always be. He has no end. Now, for us as humans, we have a timeline. For myself, I'm 64. I can go back and say, I was born on this day, and then I grew up, and then I did this. I got married at this point, and then I had my first child, and my second child, and had my first grandchild, and, I can present to you a timeline. Because as humans, we like to do that. Time, counting of days and weeks and months and years, is a human invention. Now, for the Jewish people, they essentially, they counted their time in regards to the Sabbath. How many days before the Sabbath? How many days after the Sabbath? They presented their timeline in terms of the Sabbath. They had months. Their calendar was essentially a lunar calendar and not a solar calendar like we use one. Our calendar is based on a trip of the earth one time around the sun. Their calendar was based on what they could see, the moon, so it's more like a lunar calendar. But as I said, time is more of a human invention. Now, how sure are we? Well, we're pretty sure because of certain things that we see in the Bible. Often, biblical writers will mention leaders that were in position of leadership. And we can kind of backtrack and kind of look at when they were occupying their throne. Also, often biblical writers will talk about happenings. For example, Luke mentions a census by the Roman government. We can look at that. We can look at when people were born, when people died. We get a pretty good feel for that. So we can create a fairly accurate timeline. But to tell you that we're 100% sure, No, we can't do that. It's a guess. It's a good guess, but we're not completely sure. It says in Psalm chapter 90, verse 12. In fact, let's go back to verse 10. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength, 80. For mankind now, the early patriarchs, they lived much longer, but for us today, 60, 70, 80 years is pretty typical for a person of reasonable health. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength, 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you? So teach us. Teach us to number our days. Teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. Here the writer is urging us to use our days well. Paul would echo that same thought, to be careful how you use your time. The days are limited. And James, the writer James, a half-brother, we believe, to our Lord, he reminds us of how fleeting life is. So life is short. We have to realize that, and we have to make best use of our life. Now, as I said, we have our best guess of the timeline, and we look at all these things that the Bible gives us, people who were in power, leadership, happenings, events, things like that. And we kind of backtrack and we can kind of figure out when approximately our best guess of when things took place. For example, we have to assume a start date for Adam. We can go back and assume a start date for Adam, and then we can just count up. Now, if we assume, now this is the big word, assume. If we assume a start date of approximately 4,000 or so as the date of Adam's creation, when Adam and Eve were created. If we assume approximately a date of 4,000 BC for the creation of Adam, then we know that 2,168 years later, Jacob was born. So he's born around about the 1800s BC. Okay? So we have creation of Adam around 4,000 or so BC. We have the flood. The flood would then happen around the middle of the 2300s BC. We have the beginning of the Egyptian empire. They were one of the first major empires. That would be around the 2200s BC. We have the call of Abraham. The call of Abraham would then happen around 1900 BC. We have the burning bush. The call of Moses to be the leader of God's people. That would be around maybe the late 1400s, around 1500 BC. We have the first king over Israel, King Saul. That would be around 1100 BC. And then we have the birth of Jesus. The birth of Jesus would be around 4 BC. Now, notice 4 BC. The man who invented BC and the AD timeline, he wanted the birth of Jesus to be 1 AD. The AD stands for the year of our Lord. So he wanted the birth of Jesus to be 1 AD. Unfortunately, he made a mistake in his timeline. And so the birth of Jesus could be as late as 6 BC. More likely it was around 4 BC, because we know that Herod the Great died sometime in the middle or so of 4 BC. So we know that Jesus was born before Herod died. Now, that is the timeline. Now, is that timeline accurate? We don't know for sure. That's a guess. It's a best guess. Now, what books were the first books? Well, of course, in the Old Testament is not arranged in chronological fashion. It's arranged as books of Moses, and then history, and then poetry, and then major prophets, and then minor prophets. That's how it's arranged in our English Bible. Now, it just so happened that the books of Moses would be the first books. So the books of Moses would be the first books. Someone like Job lived probably during the time period of Abraham. So the time period is probably around the time of Abraham. The book could have been written later. But those books would be the first books of the Old Testament. The last books of the Old Testament would be the three post-exile prophets. That's Zechariah, Haggai, and Malachi. That's the three prophets for the Jewish people when they return back to the promised land. And the books of Ezra and Nehemiah is also that same time period. So Ezra, Nehemiah, Zechariah, Haggai, and Malachi are those five books that kind of end the Old Testament time period. And then we start in the New Testament. Now, of course, the time period would begin with the birth of Jesus. But what books were written first? Well, the books that are written first, we don't know for sure. We think that of the Gospels, probably, and I would say the word probably Mark was written first of the four Gospels, and John was probably written last of the four Gospels. Of the other books, we think perhaps Galatians or maybe 1 Thessalonians could have been some of the early books. Certainly Revelation, the book of Revelation would be one of the last books written. So Revelation and the Gospel of John would be some of the last books written of the New Testament time period. So to answer the question, do we know for sure? We don't. But we do have a pretty good guess. And hopefully that benefited you in some way. Now, let me remind you of how important it is to click on share. When you click on share, you are increasing our audience, and that is phenomenal. So please click on share. Here at the 70 West Church of Christ, we have classes for you. Monday through Saturday at 7 and 9. If it's AM or PM, it's time for a great class from the 70 West Church of Christ. We have not forgotten our young people. We love our teenagers. We have classes for teenagers on Friday and Saturday evening at 8 o'clock. Do you have questions for me? Bible Investigation is all about your questions and Bible answers. Please email me your questions at preachermichaelcox@hotmail.com. Would you like to be involved in a free Bible correspondence course? We've got a great one, and it's free. Just send us your mailing address to 70westbiblestudies@gmail.com. Do you live here in the continental United States and would like to receive a free copy of House to House, Great Christian Articles? Just email us your mailing address, and we'd be glad to send you a free copy of House to House. Have you downloaded my free app? My free app gives you free Christian programming. It's free, so what's holding you back? It's don't forget the dot, truth.fm. Here at the 70 West Church of Christ, we have 3 worship services for you on Sunday. Have one at 7:45 for high-risk people, have one at 10 o'clock, and one at 6 o'clock. The 10 o'clock and 6 o'clock are live stream for your convenience. We also have a Wednesday Bible study in Devo that begins at 7. Once again, live streamed on Facebook and YouTube. Remember, you're always a guest at the 70 West Church of Christ. Now, it is our hope. It is our wish. It is our prayer that each one of us will live for Jesus 24/7. May God bless.